Recently, I did a video in which I talked about my mitochondrial disease. I did a video called A Day in My Life with Mitochondrial Disease. In the video, I shared that I'm on IV nutrition called TPN. The TPN requires me to infuse it through an IV line in my arm. Now, since I published that video, I've gotten a lot of questions, comments, concerns about why do I use IV nutrition? Wouldn't it be so much easier if I just used a feeding tube, maybe a J tube, which goes into your intestines, maybe a G tube, which goes into your stomach? But why, oh, why am I using IV nutrition? That is simply not needed. Well, there is a long story with why I use IV nutrition, which is also called TPN. And let me go back and share this with you because people get very, very confused. Unfortunately, when I got my tracheostomy tube in 2017, now everybody believes that I cannot swallow. This is a myth. Because you have a tracheostomy tube does not have anything to do with swallowing. Let me show you. Here is a bottle of water. Let me open the bottle of water and swallow. Look, I did not aspirate. That's right. I can swallow and I have a tracheostomy tube. So there is absolutely no reason why I actually need a feeding tube because I can swallow. But swallowing is not my issue. So let me go all the way back to the beginning to give you a brief recap about why I have IV nutrition called TPN. When I was 8 years old, I suddenly had severe stomach pain and I'd become very sick eating, especially fried food. Now, since I was a young child, people thought I was just a picky eater. When I was at the dinner table, my parents would tell me, life with a vent, you are either going to eat what is in front of you or you're going to go to bed and be hungry. So I ate what was in front of me. A couple hours later, I'd become extremely sick and then, that's right, all that glorious food all over the toilet. So yummy. Then I went to bed and guess what? I got to go to bed hungry. So I got the best of both worlds, eating and going to bed hungry. So exciting. This pattern continued every time I ate fried food. I'd become very, very sick, or fatty food. I'd become very, very sick. When I was a teenager, I was able to make my own meal decisions. Instead of getting fried food, I'd get grilled food. And my favorite thing to eat was actually salad. I love to eat salad. Salad made me feel so wonderful. Many years ago, I had sepsis and organ failure. I had a massive ovarian cyst which ruptured, and that was really the start of a lot of medical issues. Let me also mention right there, I've had a lot of medical issues even before that ruptured ovarian cyst, but once the ruptured ovarian cyst happened, then a lot of things which I was told was nothing, like a racing heart and dizziness and high blood pressure and so many other things I was told repeatedly, don't worry, that's nothing to be concerned about. Well, now this was something to be concerned about. In the following weeks, the following months, I became very, very sick. I could no longer eat or drink a lot. I became very, very ill and I had to go to the hospital. They suspected it might be my gallbladder, but this was a very hard sell to the surgeon because I was not fat. I was not over 40. I was female, but I do not have a family history. And those are the 4 things which they really base gallbladder issues on. And they're just like, it's not really your gallbladder. No, you're just being a picky eater. Thankfully, God intervened and I was able to get surgery. And yes, my gallbladder was inflamed, infected, and 3 times the normal size of a regular gallbladder. They took that out and they said if they would not have removed it when they did, I would have most likely died because my gallbladder was ready to rupture. Anyways, they said, life with a vent, now your life is going to be so much better. That gallbladder is out. And that was causing all your issues. Well, that lasted for less than 24 hours. I was able to eat some Jell-O and I was like, no pain eating Jell-O. I am good to go. I went home. So I was trying to eat mac and cheese, ramen, and I was not not feeling very well. I was very, very sick. I lost a tremendous amount of weight. I could not eat without severe, severe intestinal pain, nausea, vomiting. I was in bad, bad shape. I was able to go to a large medical institute and get some testing done. And they told me my stomach was not working. It's a condition called gastroparesis. And they're like, this is causing all your issues. And then I went for more testing and they found out that my intestines do not work properly. And it's a condition called chronic intestinal pseudo-obstruction, which is often abbreviated as CIPO. Now I was told that my gastroparesis affecting my stomach and my chronic intestinal pseudo-obstruction, which is affecting my intestine, that was causing all my issues. So the answer, we have an answer, is to get a feeding tube into my small intestine. They did that. And let me not give you a lot of details, but that was absolutely the worst procedure I've ever had done in my life. Oh, they did not use anesthesia. Just shoving a feeding tube through your intestine. Yes. Woo. Let me tell you, if you've ever had pain, it's nothing like a feeding tube going right through your intestine, through your abdominal wall, and being pulled out the other side. Oh, yes. I still have nightmares about that. So I started on feeding tube formula. They started me on a feeding tube pump, which pumped formula into my small intestine. And this was supposed to give me all the magical nutrition. Yeah, that didn't work very well. I was very, very sick. I was having stomach pain and a lot of gas, bloating. And they're just like, well, that's because you need to try a different formula. So I went on a formula called elemental formula. That did nothing. I was still severely sick. And I was also now vomiting all the way from my small intestine. If you like vomiting from your small intestine is even better because first you have to pump once to get the stuff from your small intestine into your stomach, and then pump two to get everything from your stomach up out into the toilet. So you're like, hours and hours of fun. Anyways, I was told, well, there's no reason you should be throwing this up. You should be good as new, but you are not. We're just going to abandon you. I love it when they abandon me. So I found a new medical provider. And she said to me, you are severely malnourished. You're severely dehydrated. You are in heart failure. Yes, heart failure, and you need something. So there is a nutrition called IV nutrition, which is abbreviated as TPN. They infused it through intravenous line. She gave me what was called a PICC line. A PICC line is an intravenous line through my arm, and it gets threaded up and ends in my heart. So I had that, and I miraculously was able to get nutrition. My heart stopped failing, and I was on the road to recovery. I know, it was great, right? Yes, but I did not want to be on TPN for the rest of my life because there are a lot of issues with being on TPN. So I started my own magical diet. It was called a complete elimination diet. I had eaten nothing for a couple months, and so I started trying one food at a time. I started off with something totally benign, mushrooms. Would mushrooms cause me to be sick? Nope, they did not. So I started eating mushrooms, and then I added things like, does rice make me sick? Yes, rice makes me very sick. So by rice, we are no longer eating you. And then I tried different things like, does asparagus make me sick? Nope, it doesn't. So now I have asparagus and mushrooms. So I kept doing that. I kept adding one food little by little and seeing if I had any GI issues. And basically what I found is I could eat vegetables, almost all vegetables. I can eat a lot of fruits, but then beyond that, I cannot eat any grains. No corn, no wheat, no barley, no oats. I cannot eat soy. I get very, very sick eating soy. And the list goes on. And I have a lot of issues eating animal products. The one exception are eggs. Eggs work fine for me and I don't get very sick. And at that time, I was able to periodically eat some chicken, but I in general just ate vegetables mainly, a little bit of eggs and a little bit of fruit. And I was good to go, but I was severely, severely malnourished because there are not a lot of calories in vegetables. But I continued on. Now a problem arose. I was abruptly getting very sick trying to eat eggs, and I realized fat and protein was making me very, very sick. I went to my GI doctor and I said, Doctor, I know why I'm getting so sick. I have chronic pancreatitis. The doctor said, no, you don't. That's not chronic pancreatitis. No, chronic pancreatitis is a very complicated disease and you'd be sick for many, many years and you'd have pancreatitis attacks and we would know if you had chronic pancreatitis. No, you don't have chronic pancreatitis. And well, I was not very happy. So I said, okay, doctor, bye. We'll see you later. On my way home from the appointment, I bought a small piece of salmon. Salmon, if you know, is quite fatty. So I went home, I cooked the salmon, I ate the salmon. 4 hours later, I went to the emergency department, and guess what? I was having a pancreatitis attack. It was so exciting, really. Pancreatitis, there's just nothing like having severe abdominal pain, vomiting, and thinking you're going to die because the pain is so bad. Oh. Anyways, I got hospitalized. The next day, the GI doctor came and visited me in the hospital. He was very confused why I was able to provoke a pancreatitis attack in 4 hours. I was fine 4 hours ago, and then I was in the emergency department with pancreatitis. And I told the doctor, this is what happens every time I eat fat or protein, except I never come to the emergency department for it. But I guess we now know that every time this happens, I'm having a pancreatitis attack. So the doctor agreed with me. Yes, I probably do have chronic pancreatitis. And now I finally had a diagnosis. Chronic pancreatitis is what was causing all my GI issues. Now that I had a diagnosis of chronic pancreatitis, the only treatment for it were getting digestive enzymes and eating a low-fat diet. My diet consisted of no more than 20 grams of fat a day, and it also was very low protein. This worked well for a while, and because this worked well, I still had my feeding tube, and I was able to get my feeding tube removed, even though I was not using it. It was just there because that's what happens. You get medical devices implanted and then nobody takes them out. So I finally got my feeding tube removed and I thought, goodbye, medicine. It was so lovely to see you. Not really. Bye. In 2017, I got my tracheostomy tube. After getting my tracheostomy tube, the doctors assumed, you have a tracheostomy tube. You can't swallow. We are going to give you a feeding tube. Won't that be lovely? No, I severely, and I do mean severely, protested getting a feeding tube because the other feeding tube was an epic failure. And this feeding tube, they were just going to put into my stomach. My stomach does not work very well. I have to eat very small meals very frequently, and my stomach often bloats up, and it's just very uncomfortable. So putting a feeding tube into my stomach would do absolutely nothing but make me very sick. But they didn't believe me, so they put a nasal feeding tube up my nose, down into my stomach. And I was going to get nutrition that way because they erroneously believed I could not swallow because now I had a tracheostomy tube. You know what happened within 24 hours of them doing that? I was profusely sick. I was in severe pain, had bloating, my abdomen just bloated up, and I was starting to throw up. Nothing like throwing up with a tracheostomy tube. It was so much fun. And so after that, I said, I can swallow. Please give me a swallow test. I am not doing this feeding tube thing anymore. I need to eat and drink by mouth. So thankfully they did the swallow test, and literally my swallow test was like this. Okay, now swallow. Yeah, that looks good. I think you can swallow. So I was able to eat and drink by mouth. Hallelujah. So my life was good again. I had tracheostomy tube and no feeding tube, and I was eating and drinking by mouth. And then 2020 came and I became severely sick. All food, and I do mean all food. I could not even eat even like a tomato, just a simple tomato, or maybe like asparagus, or maybe peas and carrots. I don't know. Everything was making me sick, and there was no fat or anything on this. It was just plain vegetables, and I was so sick. I now had a new GI doctor. Hi, new GI doctor. How are you? And he didn't think there was anything wrong with me not being able to eat. He told me, when you start losing weight, which I had lost 30 pounds. Yes, 30 pounds. That's a lot. Anyways, when you start losing weight, we will be concerned. And my mom was very upset. hello, I'd lost 30 pounds. I was very underweight. I was having severe heart pain or severe chest pain, which we attributed probably to my heart, but the doctor was not concerned. Finally, the doctor agreed. Okay, we will give you a feeding tube. Again, remember, we've had 2 feeding tubes and both of them, 2 feeding tubes, lots of vomiting, not good. But I knew for insurance purposes, I needed to have a feeding tube. And once I failed a feeding tube, then I can go on IV nutrition. You cannot skip that step. You can't just say, I can't eat IV nutrition. That's not how it works. You go, I can't eat feeding tube. I still can't eat IV nutrition. So I allowed them to give me a feeding tube. The feeding tube was an epic, and I do mean an epic disaster. I have never been so sick in my entire life. The feeding tube did not work. I could not tolerate the feeding tube formula. The feeding tube formula just made me vomit, and it swelled up my abdomen, and my abdomen was just so big and large, and I was so dehydrated. Anyways, here is the actual feeding tube. I know. And if you want to know, this part of the feeding tube was outside my abdomen. This part was inside my abdomen. Yes, that is a very long tail. Why they kept this all inside, I don't know. But as you can see, it can tingle, it can tingle. Oh, and that's what it did. It tingled and caused a bowel obstruction. If you didn't think I was in enough pain from not being able to eat or drink, now I had a bowel obstruction. It's so exciting. Anyways, that was a horrible fiasco, but thankfully the feeding tube finally straightened itself out and we were good to go. And I was told to keep using that feeding tube. Another divine series of events occurred and I was miraculously able to get in contact with a GI doctor at the same GI clinic, but it was not my GI doctor and I was able to be sent to the hospital. They saw on lab tests my protein levels were low and my heart was in heart failure. So they decided the only thing they could do was start me on IV nutrition called TPN. Thankfully, I already had a PICC line in my arm because I just happened to have pneumonia at the same time. I love how that all works. And for pneumonia, I was getting intravenous antibiotics. So they did not have to have a PICC line in me because I already had one. So they started me on IV nutrition called TPN and my life got so much better. And that was in 2001. Since 2001, my pancreas really has not improved much. I can't eat fat. I can't eat protein. I can eat a very small amount, maybe like a small apple I might be able to nibble on throughout the day, or maybe some plain vegetables. But even that causes severe amounts of pain. And there's no way I can maintain my weight without using IV nutrition called TPN. There's just no way I can do that. I can't get fat, I can't get protein, and I can't get the calories. So that is why I have IV nutrition. It's because I have chronic pancreatitis and I've had chronic pancreatitis for a very long time. My pancreas is just failing. It's more than 90% of my pancreas has failed, and it will probably continue to fail because if you know anything about chronic pancreatitis, it happens. The enzymes try to release through your ducts. They get stopped because of swelling and inflammation, and then those enzymes start digesting your pancreas, and it causes more swelling and fibrosis, which is scarring of the pancreas, and it just continues, and it just keeps killing more and more of your pancreas. And you say, that's terrible, life with the vent. Isn't there anything they can do? Yes, they can rip out your pancreas, and then they also rip out your spleen, part of your small intestine, part of your stomach, and if you still have your gallbladder, they take your gallbladder out too. It sounds like such a wonderful invasive procedure, and it is. And I was told by a surgeon who does this, life with the vent, you will never, ever survive that surgery. If you have that surgery, you will most likely die on the operating table. So we cannot do the surgery. And I was like, hallelujah, because I don't want the surgery. No thanks. I prefer not to lose organs, and I prefer to choose to live. I like living, and my IV nutrition called TPN is helping me live. So that is a very abbreviated, and I do mean a very abbreviated story. My story is much, much longer, but that is why I use IV nutrition called TPN. And no, a G-tube, which is a tube which goes into your stomach, will not work because I have gastroparesis and chronic intestinal pseudo-obstruction and chronic pancreatitis. And no, a feeding tube going into my small intestine called a J-tube will not work because chronic pancreatitis, it just won't work. No, IV nutrition is the only way I'm able to get nutrition. I'm very happy. I'm very very grateful for. I know it might seem like a lot of work to people, but I am so pleased and so happy because this right here is the healthiest nutrition-wise I've ever been in my life. And I'm so extremely grateful and thankful for that. So thank you so much for joining me. Please remember to like and subscribe down below. Please also remember to comment and share. It really helps my YouTube channel. I hope you have a great day and a wonderful week. Bye-bye. On my way home from the appointment, I bought a small piece of salmon. Salmon, if you know, is quite fatty. So I went home, I cooked the salmon, I ate the salmon, and 4 hours later, the phone rang. Yes, 4 hours later, the phone rang.